Thank you for inviting me to Developer Weeks, Global Developer Weeks. My name is Hamid Arbai. I am a software architect and Microsoft MVP in developer technologies. So if you have any questions during this presentation, you can use the chat option in the right, so I can answer you now or after. So today we will talk at the beginning about the advantages of microservices compared to monolithic application. Then we will prepare an environment in order to start the Service Fabric demos. In changing markets, one of the main challenges of maintaining the competitiveness of digital businesses remains IT agility. However, in their current state, computer systems are struggling to adapt to the latest technological developments such as mobility or of Internet of Things and to their new requirements. With a large number of dependencies of services linked to the life cycle of an IT project, each modification of the source code of a classical monolithic application can destabilize it in maintenance. For these reasons, companies have resorted to more optimized, scalable architecture, ensuring continuous availability and less costly in terms of research consumption, and in particular oriented microservices. This change is really essential facing the aggressive competition and in particular that of startups which are not yet congested by rigid infrastructure. Before talking about microservices, we need to understand the difference between the traditional application approach and the microservices application approach. Any application is built as a collection of services, can be developed, tested, versioned, deployed, and scaled. For monolithic application, scales is done by cloning the apps on multiple server or virtual machines. But for microservices, scale is done by deploying each independently with multiple instances across server or virtual machine. So I highly recommend this link of Martin Fowler if you need more details about microservices. Microservices are very similar to the beehives. Within a hive, thousands of bees coexist and help each other for a single common goal, the survivor of the colony. The queen and the worker and the drone each one have their particularities and must therefore assume very distinct tasks. When developing a server-side application, you can start it with a modular, hexagonal, or layered architecture which consists of different types of component of layer. Here, the first one we will talk about here, presentation layer, the first one, that is your user interface. It can be a web, mobile, desktop application. The service layer is responsible for handling HTTP requests and responding with either HTML like JSON, XML, or web services like APIs. The business logic is the treatment here of our application, and in the bottom we have the data access layer, that is data access object responsible for the access to the database. Despite having a logical modular architecture, the application is packaged and deployed as a monolith. Monolith applications are more single complete packages, having all the related needs, components, and services encapsulated in unique packages. But if we see the second approach, microservices, the idea is really simple. It consists to split your application into set of smaller interconnected services instead of building a single monolith application. Each microservice is a small application. Here we have the benefits of microservices. So microservices allow us to scale, deploy parts of application independently. They offer great distributed software challenges. But with these benefits, we cannot always choose microservices as a strategy and patterns because they are intended for large scalable and long-term distributed application. Do not underestimate the complexity in implementation and testing. Now we will present the different architecture or patterns of microservices. And this table summarizes the modern patterns and technology to be used, like containers. There are many models, most of them which are linked from the domain-driven design, like Service Fabric that we will talk about it today. Companies face challenges in their passage to the cloud because, for example, there is the optimization of the development of microservices to be taken into account. Similarly, achieving reliable consistency of state and data without latency problems. Monitoring and governance at global and granular levels execution of highly secure application on a large scale until integration and continuous development. Microsoft Azure include quite a few platform as a services to host and deploy microservices. So we have the Azure App Services, Service Fabric. Today we will talk about it. Kubernetes service, that is the orchestrator. Container instance to deploy containers, and we have batches too. There are three major services in Azure. So we have the Service Fabric, which we will see it more in detail during our session today. It supports microservices developed by any languages, and Service Fabric Mesh offers more features, intelligence, like routing, but we will not talk about this today. So we have Azure Kubernetes and Azure Container Instance here, and we have the function as a services, here container as a services, here platform as a service, and container as a services. And here Azure functions, it's based on building some functions which is a part of the service and that we will act according to the triggers. So now what's Service Fabric? Service Fabric allows you to create and manage scalable and reliable application composed of microservices. These distributed microservices run at very high density on a shared pool of virtual machines, which correspond to cluster. Service Fabric represents the next generation platform for building and managing this cloud-level Tier 1 enterprise, for example, application running in container and works with other providers such as AWS and OpenStack. It's not only Azure Fabric service. So here we present the different elements that we should know about Service Fabric. So the cluster and the structure. So the cluster is a network connected set of virtual machines. There are many virtual machines in which your microservices are deployed and managed. Here the node are the virtual machines that belong to the Service Fabric clusters. Service Fabric can be run anywhere. You can create clusters for Service Fabric in many environments, including Azure or locally. On Windows Server, for example, or Linux, so it's multi-platform. You can even create cluster on other public clouds. In addition, the development environment in the SDK is identical to the production environments, with an emulator involved. In other words, what runs on your local development cluster is deployed to the cluster in other environments. Service Fabric is an open source project and it's used in many Azure infrastructure services as well as other Microsoft services, including Azure Event Hub, Azure Cosmos DB, Azure SQL DB. Here we have what's in Azure. Here we have many other services. In this diagram, we have the Service Fabric architecture. Each layer has a specific role. So we'll only talk about the transport subsystem, federation subsystem, and you can find more detail in the Microsoft documentation. The first layer from the bottom, the transport subsystem is responsible for providing secure communication channels between the nodes of a Service Fabric cluster. The above federation subsystems allows you to logically group physical or virtual nodes in a cluster so that it can be managed as a unit. This helps Service Fabric to perform tasks such as troubleshooting, electing leaders, and routing. The transport subsystems provide a communication channel for intra and inter-cluster communications. The federation subsystem is responsible for the logical grouping of virtual or physical machines to form a Service Fabric cluster. This subsystem uses the communication infrastructure provided by the transport subsystem to achieve this consolidation. So as I said, more detail about the other layers, you'll find them in the Microsoft documentation. You will find that in the end of this presentation, all the link that you need. Now we go to talk about monitoring and diagnostics. So monitoring and diagnostics are critical to developing, testing, and deploying workloads in any cloud environment. For example, you can track how your applications are used, the action taken by the Service Fabric platform, your research using with performance counter, and the overall health of your cluster. And here, supervision is useful for any application, for your application, the cluster, the infrastructure, and for other logging solution. And today in our demo, we will see how we can use Service Fabric Explorer in Azure and locally. But you can, if you need more details about the infrastructure, for example, and more logs, we have another services here, Monitor, Azure Monitor, that you can use it to have more details. Now, before we start our demos, we must meet these prerequisites in order to be able to configure our Windows development environment to create Service Fabric. So what we need is to have the latest version of Windows 10 Professional Enterprise, because we need, if you talk about containers, so we need to have Docker, even if here I mentioned that is optional, but we need to talk about container in Docker, how we can use it with Service Fabric. We need Visual Studio, the 2019 or 17, the important that it have to build in support for Docker and for Service Fabric. We need to have the .NET Core SDK Microsoft Service Fabric. We'll share the link after, and the Docker for Windows and the tools. Now, to be faster, I recorded setting up Windows development environment, because sometimes to install that it takes few minutes. So I will give you an overview. So we start by setting up how we can set up our environments. Here you can find in the presentation the link to install Visual Studio. So we have 3 versions. You can use community version that is free, the others professional enterprise. And to install the Microsoft Azure SDK, we have so here you click on the link, you will install, and you will launch web platform installer, and you will choose the first one, that is SDK, Service Fabric SDK, and not the mesh, because it's more specific here, as you can see. So we will accept, and it will be installed in our machine. Now we go to Visual Studio to verify if everything are installed. So here we choose Service Fabric application. Now we will set up our, we will try to find Service Fabric local manager to launch, to manage our clusters locally. So we need to run it as an administrator. And in the bottom, you can find the icon here of Service Fabric. We click on Manage Local Cluster. Here, as you can see, we need to start it first. After, we will choose Manage Local Cluster. Here we have the number of nodes. In our case, we will use 5 nodes, but you can use only one. It's up to you. Here, when we start, this is Service Fabric Explorer. As we said before, it's for to monitor, to see our application, the health of our application. And here we can deploy our application in the cluster. Here we chose 5 nodes, so select 5 nodes. No application currently. Now we will create Service Fabric using Visual Studio. So here we choose Service Fabric, and we choose stateless, and we try to launch our application just to build or rebuild or build your application, and the application will be added in the Service Fabric Explorer. Here you can find many logs to diagnostics events. And now we will check our application. So we have 5 nodes, but the application was deployed locally in our machine. As you can see here, the name. And we have many information to help us if we have any problems with our cluster or with the nodes or with the application too. Here. If it's green, so no problems. Now we will publish a Service Fabric using Visual Studio. Here we click on Publish. After, we will choose 5 nodes in our case. If you have 1 node, so we choose 1 node. Here we have local cluster, and we will choose application parameters. We have 5 nodes too, and we click on Publish. When we deploy our application, we get the application, but when we end it, the application will not be in the Explorer. So we need to publish it to be running in the cluster always in the Explorer. Here, we don't have any application, as you can see. And if we refresh, we have our application. And as you can see here, I just publish it without starting. So we have the application. Here we have the service manifest. Now we will try to get .NET Core application from GitHub. So we will close the other one. And we try to clone an example from GitHub of Microsoft to try to test Service Fabric in .NET application. And we will compile this application. We try to publish it, not only locally, but we will try to publish it on Azure. Here, as you can see, I will just click on A7. This application is for voting. It's really simple .NET Core application. Here we have the structure. We click. Here we have the structure. We have data parts, the web, and here, as you can see, our Service Fabric project that is added to be able to deploy as Service Fabric, to be able to use the Service Fabric. Here we will compile. we will check. We have two applications. When we launch our application, it will be added. Here we have the first one that was published, the second one. Here you can see our project inside data and web. Now, here, as you can see, we can have some problems. We can check. So we can know where is the problems and why. We can check that. We can use the beta version 2 for Service Fabric Explorer to be able to know what's new. You can upgrade after. Here, as you can see, we have some problems in our application. So our Explorer detect that. Now we will try to do publish. If we refresh here, I'll try to refresh. We have only one, the first one that we deployed. Now, if this is the application that we use it, that we clone it, and if we deploy it, as you can see, it will be added here. So we have everything is working. So we can add the votes, remove. So it seems working. So for this instance, we have the green status here. So if we have the red status, it means that we have some problems. Now we will deploy Service Fabric application to cluster in Azure. To do that, we click on Publish here, the same thing. So, but now we will use Cloud XML, not local cluster here, not the 1 node, 5 node. Here, as you can see, we have many tabs: cluster, certificate, VM detail, advanced. So we need to create from Visual Studio Azure Service Fabric. So we fill all what we need here. We need to create a new research group, for example, to be able to search after of our research group of our Service Fabric. It will be Azure in search. So we create. We need to fill all information here. We click on create, request all, as you can see. So we need to fill all. And advanced, so certificates, VM details, and here. So here, if we are adding some password, we will create our VMs where our cluster will be deployed. I will try to go faster because time is running. So here we choose the virtual size. So it's here. Now, if we go to as you can see here, and now here, if we go to Azure, we can launch. The first thing is to verify the Explorer. When we go to where we try to search for Service Fabric, our Service Fabric, so we will launch the Service Fabric Explorer. We have our nodes here and the application deploys. And here I have my Service Fabric. And if I would try to launch our application, we have the link in the research, in our Service Fabric research, and we can add it here. We can check if it works. It works like locally, as you can see here. We have 5 nodes. We have all what we need. Now we go to execute Docker container as Service Fabric. So we will talk about Docker container. Here we can see how we can deploy container in many ways. And to build and execute Docker container as Service Fabric, we will use Visual Studio. But now we will choose containers. So we do the same thing, Service Fabric application. We give a name to the project. And we create it. And here we choose containers. we need to check to find if you have any image, you need to introduce an image name, username of your image, the port, container port, and after if you create, you click on create, you can compile it as container and service fabric, both of them. So you can deploy it as a container instance in Azure or as a container in service fabric. You can take the advantages of containers and service fabrics as a strategy of deployment. As you can see here, you have the image mentioned in the service manifest configuration. And today we talked, so we tried just to use stateless services that now state is maintained in the services. And we have the stateful, and difference was in the image. And to finish, today what we have in demo, so we get some an overview about microservices. We try to set up the environments to deploy locally, deploy on Azure. And here we can find the presentation, all reference that I use it that to have more information about Service Fabric. And if you have a question, thank you. Okay, the reference. Okay, sure. You need the reference, but you can find this in PPT deck. The presentation will be shared, so you can find all our research here. Okay, I'm trying to see if you have any questions. Okay, you can get started. So you will find all links and the presentation to share it after. Any support. Now, no, for VS Code, no. We can use only Visual Studio, but maybe in the future, yes. But now, no, for Visual Studio Code. Okay. How hard is this to do without Visual Studio directly in Azure? Okay, about it's really simple. I use Visual Studio because it's really simple, but it's not really hard using. You can use Azure CLI as usual. It's not really complicated to do that. Maybe in another session we can share that. I can share that. It can be an idea. Yes, it can be scripted without using. Yes, sure. Yes. So we can use Azure CLI too to create our service fabric. Yes, but I want just to show some things related to Visual Studio in the simple way to start with Service Fabric. But we can use Azure CLI, yes, to deploy it on Azure, yes. Yes, you can use Service Fabric with CI/CD pipelines. Yes, in Azure DevOps, it's integrated, yes. It can be another session too. Thank you for the idea. Thank you for these questions, really. Maybe another session to see the difference, and another part is really important to DevOps, the CI/CD pipelines too. It's a large topic. It's in short time. I hope that you will like it. Thank you.